The main character tells about the Empire of La Spezia, for whom a prediction is given at the time of birth. The main character got a prediction called, "Don't let your desires blind you." However, the girl did not take him seriously and did not adhere to him. She did not restrain her desires and did everything she wanted. Over time, the girl's life began to crumble. It all started with the fact that the girl was abandoned by the man for whom she did and gave everything to him. Then her daughter was taken from her, whom she loved incredibly, and who did not want to leave her mother. In the past, in the Empire of La Spezia, a man was standing on the balcony. He was a person whom the heroine trusted, and he loved her. He was the saddest person and the second prince, George. Since his mother was a slave, the boy was often bullied and mocked from childhood, mainly by the masters and other upper classes of society. The guy sat forlornly, rubbing his temples, and said sadly that he had only one close person, and that was Rita. She came over and started talking to George. The heroine tells more about the past of the prince. He was beaten as a child, due to the fact that he was the illegitimate child of Count Cardinale and was considered a low caste. She understood his feelings, because she was also beaten as a child. He was a sad man with a very difficult fate. For herself, the main character promised that she would always be on his side, no matter what happened. She felt sorry for him, but she wasn't in a much better position either. People called her a witch behind her back and even came up with a new name for her, the Cardinal Witch. She was often spoken badly about, kicked out, and called names. She even agreed to marry a duke she didn't love in order to make George emperor. The husband was chosen by her father, and he turned out to be the prince of the Empire of La Spezia, the crown prince thrown to his will. He became the king of the desert north, the Grand Duke of Catan. For George, she will be the Archduchess of Catan. But she considered building a relationship with him a waste of time. That's how much she loved him, but only she considered it love. After their political marriage, the heroine helped George overthrow his own brother, Prince Carlos. Everyone loved the prince, and he was first in line to the throne, and George didn't like it. And as a result, she did make this man emperor. But as a result, she received betrayal. Rumors quickly spread, which turned out to be true, that the emperor was marrying another woman, and you yourself were making her empress. One night, when she felt betrayed, he came to her. A little worried, the man asked her if she was all right. The girl, with tears of sadness, asked him to comfort her, although it was a marriage of convenience, which she did not want. But over time, she had a daughter, Yvonne, whom she loved very much. Her daughter was beautiful and sweet, and even the maids talked about it. When the maid offered the heroine to hug her daughter, she was a little confused and did not know how to properly behave with the child. The child herself took the initiative and took her finger, which touched the heroine. Later, she took the child in her arms, and in the end realized that it was her child who taught her what true love is. Also, she didn't want George to be sad. She didn't want to see him sad again. But at the same time, she wasn't happy to see him smile. But Yvonne's smile really made her happy and made her smile herself. The child began to walk and grew up to be a happy girl. She often smiled and was very beautiful with sparkles in her eyes. She changed the main character's whole life. She understood that everything that happened before was not love, but her love for her daughter was true love. The heroine loved her daughter incredibly much, but this happiness did not last long. There was noise around. The heroine was alarmed. Someone was looking for her child. The woman had a bad feeling, so she hid the child and told her not to leave the secret room behind the picture. The girl was scared. There was a scream. Strangers were looking for the child, and the guards were shouting so that the lady had time to run away and scream. She told Yvonne that it was just a game and tried to calm her down. And then the door to the room opened. The man told the others to look everywhere for the child. They were people who served George. She asked the man, Sir Robert, what he was doing here and whether he was afraid to rush in on them. He laughed bitterly and asked why she was surprised and whether she should be called Lady Cardinale or Catan now. Robert said that the Archduke had found evidence of her betrayal and suspected her of a conspiracy. The girl was surprised by these words. Then he added that she could give him the child and he would ensure her safety. She did not understand what was happening. It was impossible. Joseph gave up the right to inherit the throne and became the forgotten crown prince, and the heroine had already lived quietly in Katana for a long time. And he should have no claim to the throne after all this. His people heard breathing and found a secret door where the child was hidden. She tried to stop them, but could not. The man was very happy with the situation. The woman did not understand how this could happen. The heroine was frightened and remembered how she once told George about the secret passage to Katana Castle. She yelled for them to stop while they removed the painting that hid the secret room. After warning them that if they didn't stop, they would stay here, she worked her magic. The men continued to mock her, calling her a witch, but were not at all frightened. The heroine hated being called a witch, so she rarely used magic, screaming the spell and doing whatever it takes with tears in my eyes. The magic dissipated and did not work. The woman was in a stupor and did not understand why it did not work. She pondered that maybe it had been too long since she had last used magic, and she didn't understand why things had gone wrong now. She had to find Joseph. During this time, the men found a girl who was very frightened. Robert was glad to have found her, and his mother was worried about her. Panic began in the woman's head, and she wanted to scream and threaten the man to let Yvonne go, but instead she began to beg and beg him to let her daughter go, offering to take everything from him except her daughter and saying that she would talk to George herself. He exhaled heavily and told her the news. That His Majesty the Emperor abandoned her, tears flowed from her eyes. After that, he involuntarily adds with a smirk that her husband is dead while holding a tearful Yvonne. Rita is shocked. He says that the Emperor ordered to bring her and her daughter to the palace. On the same day, Yvonne is taken to the palace, but they do not plan to return. The main character is in despair. Now she had neither husband nor child. George pretends to be worried that Rita has lost a lot of weight. He says that there is nothing he can do, and reminds her of the prophecy for Yvonne that came true. It said that a demi-king would come from the north. The heroine added that this part was about Yvonne. Although she is a girl, her blood flows mixed with the blood of the Empire and Joseph, he happily explained. He reminded her that he had not captured the entire territory of the Empire. He said that at first he wanted to just get Joseph and Carlo out of sight, but it was too late to have children. He ran his hand over her face and said that he wanted her to bear him a child, especially a son who would be more beautiful than Yvonne. Rita pushed his hand away and screamed with tears and anger for him to leave her alone and not touch her again. The woman scattered the ashes of her relatives in the river, when suddenly the butler reminded her that the Emperor had sent a patrol to them and she needed to flee. She was emotionless. She had to let go of Joseph and Yvonne and somehow move on with her life. But she asked, "Still a little time before you, how to go?" She returned to the kingdom of Catan for their sake, and the heroine was very hard. The butler informed them that they had little time, and the knights would arrest George's men, and Rita must flee along the path Joseph had left for her. She had not heard of this path until now. The Emperor ordered the Archduke to bring Yvonne, but Joseph refused to do so. After that, he began to prepare for such a turn of events, the man explained. Although he was promised not to touch Catan if he gave away the princess, he managed to prepare an escape route and kept it a secret. Rita realized that he was willing to give up Catan to save Yvonne. The butler sadly nodded his confirmation and said that Joseph loved his daughter very much. Rita became emotional and began to remember her husband. Although she thought he was cold and uncaring, he really loved their child very much. The girl started to cry and felt guilty. The heroine reflected on the fact that she put her middle brother on the throne and even helped him get rid of his younger brother. She then wondered if she could ever be truly happy with Joseph. She never married him and did not love him. The girl believed that he was a good man after all. Although he was cold but also polite, he never insulted or accused her of anything. She did not like it. The boy was often silent and had bright eyes. Also, she felt that he did not approve of her relationship with George, but after that he was preparing the way for salvation for her and Yvonne. With a sad smile, Rita apologized to the butler for that she was not a good enough hostess. Dvoretsky replied that she should not worry and that everything is fine and he does not accuse her of anything. The woman took him by the shoulder and said that she would end this situation. He was frightened and asked what she meant and what she wanted to do. She answered, "That would prevent George from destroying Catan," and went in the opposite direction from the escape route. Dvoretsky was nervous and tried to stop her, but the girl was already on her way to the gate. George's army was already approaching the kingdom. Robert, who was the main one in the attack on the kingdom, told Rita to let them go if she didn't want to get hurt, because the Emperor said to save her life only, while taking her prisoner. Meanwhile, the heroine stood in the alchemical circle. Rita looked at him with a smile and asked why George needed her alive. Robert was indignant about that and warned her not to speak disrespectfully about the Emperor. After that, she decided to warn them, at the expense of the fact that they do not cross the line that she drew. The man teased her and said that she could not threaten him. He ordered everyone to go forward without stopping. The woman smiled and said that she had warned them. After that, the circle in which she was standing began to glow, and lightning began to come from it. The knights began to panic and realized what it was. But later, someone shouted that it was a witch's trap, and that they should retreat. Rita was glad that she was able to drive them away. She laughed, but alchemy was not magic and it had to be paid for. She bled, but she was ready for it, so she didn't worry about it. Rita made it clear that she would not let anyone destroy Catan. After that, she collapsed, thinking she had done all she could. The heroine woke up and was surprised by this. Immediately after waking up, she was roughly grabbed by the hair and she shuddered. Her father yelled at her and accused her of embarrassing him. Rita's cheek was red and she was surprised to see her father again. The girl did not understand what he was doing in Katana and was even more surprised that she was still alive. She began to think that if she was here, the circle did not work. Sitting in front of her father, she did not know what to do. Having decided to ask him about Catan, the father became angry. He began to shout even more and demanded an explanation because why she said that she did not want to marry the Duke of Catania. Rita did not understand what he was talking about. The man hit her painfully while shouting that he just wanted her to be around George, who was soon to be emperor, and that she might not even hope to become empress. The last thing he said before leaving was for her to stop talking nonsense and get ready for her wedding to Duke Catan. Rita noticed that her father looked very young and still did not understand what was happening. She began to remember her life. She gave birth to Yvonne after a year of marriage, and she died at the age of 6, which meant that she married Joseph 7 years ago. With this account, nothing coincided, and the girl tried to understand what happened after the circle. They approached her and asked if everything was okay. She turned and asked another girl what she was doing here. It was a maid, and her name was Sabrina. She was the heroine's personal maid and spent her entire childhood with her. And she also had an affair with George, who dumped her. However, as a result, Sabrina still couldn't escape her servant status if she didn't want to. Therefore, as a result, she was abandoned and humiliated. Rita did not understand why her maid was here, but she told him that George would soon come to the meeting. Also, the girl offered Rita help to prepare. The heroine thought it was a dream. She did not want to see the man who had destroyed her entire life again. She would rather see her beloved daughter again. Rita gritted her teeth at the memory of what had happened and said she wanted to rest and wasn't going to the meeting. Sabrina helped her up. And inside, the heroine thought that she did not even want to see a dream in which Yvonne was not present. The maid immediately beamed and asked if she could convey the heroine's words to George. About herself, Rita thought that they were probably just happy to be alone, but decided to let them do what they wanted. She thought they were more likely to kiss in the living room since it was George's style. He spoke to Rita about love, while at the same time giving hope to Sabrina. The girl sat on her bed, exhaled, and said that the maid could go. When she left, the heroine curled up on the bed. She began to cry and begged that if it was a dream, then for it to end quickly, or for her to dream of Yvonne. In the next moment, the girl found herself in another room near the alchemical circle. As it turned out, this was the place where the girl drew the formula for the last time, that is, the underground room of Catan. Rita began to carefully examine the formula, when suddenly it began to change, why she was surprised. The girl carefully considered the formula because she had never seen one like it before, and she did not understand who could change it, since even the alchemists in Katana did not understand her formulas. A formula is a language for alchemists, and Rita tried to understand what this one was talking about. Suddenly, she understood something. Namely, that with the help of this new formula, it would be possible to save Catan. She tried to understand this formula because then she might have a chance to save the kingdom, and most importantly, Yvonne. But for that, she had to understand exactly what kind of alchemy it was. Almost immediately after these thoughts, the alchemy circle disappeared, leaving her sitting on the ground. The girl was in despair because she almost found a way out. After that, the girl woke up in a cold sweat and found that she was still lying on her bed. She stood up thinking this formula was important and unfortunately she didn't have time to fully understand it. but she definitely had to have a way to save Catan. Another maid was dealing with flowers when she heard the bell and went to the heroine's room. The girl rang the bell and now realized that Alchemy, taking her life hostage, turned back time. A modest-looking girl came to the room and asked how she could help. Rita realized that she was in her past. Although she did not know why or to whom this happened, this was her chance, which she did not want to miss. For this, Rita decided that she should know the current situation, what is happening, and find it out quickly, so she asked where George is now. The maid replied that he was in the living room, and Sabrina had just gone to tell him that Rita was ill. The heroine said that she is much better now and wants to meet the prince, at which the maid was surprised and a little scared. She thought for a moment. Later, she smiled and said that she just turned the ankle and threw a cloak on top. But she asked the frightened girl for help. She agreed. After some time, they were standing in front of the door. The maid was very nervous and stopped the heroine from opening the door, because of which Rita looked at her in surprise. She said that the Count wanted to tell her something, and it was obvious that it was a lie, so the heroine realized that she knew what was happening inside and was worried about it. Rita asked her name, and the girl bowed slightly and answered that it was Rona. The heroine thought that there were other servants similar to Rona in her life, but she refused their help and threw everything at their cheap sympathy and kept a distance from them. It was strange for her to realize now that they really cared about her. She smiled and thanked Rona. The maid beamed at these words, and within a minute Rita had already entered the room, while Ronnie made one last effort to stop her. When they walked in, they saw a picture of Sabrina clinging to George and talking about how much she missed him. In response, he also told her that he missed her. Since the two didn't notice her come in, she coughed to be noticed. The man turned and began to complain that he had asked that no one be allowed into the room. He was shocked and unmoved when he saw Rita. But as an excuse, he began to tell that he was told that she was ill. Rita, on the other hand, looked at it with interest and awe and thought that it was impossible to try to mislead her after she got here from the future. She wasn't planning to just sit back and watch what they were doing. In the end, he destroyed her family. Rita waved and told him that they hadn't seen each other in a while, thinking that George would be the first. The room was very smoky with a guy. The heroine's eyes began to water from the smoke and she coughed, and the man began to make excuses that he did not look in the best light in front of her. He smoked and asked if she asked him to tell her that she was sick. She replied that she felt better after lying down for a while. But she said that after that, she rushed to him so that he would not wait for her, and noticed that as soon as she entered, Sabrina immediately left the room. And the man stopped being nervous a long time ago and was self-confident, as always. He moved closer to her and told her that the maid was just a toy for him that he used to practice how to treat women. Rita was not happy with his actions and thought he was ugly. George straightened her hair and asked her if she remembered the help she and the Earl had agreed to give him. The girl's face darkened. Rita pushed his hand away and asked if she agreed to this. He noticed that she was annoyed and replied that she had already agreed and asked if she had prepared a cloaking potion for him. She thought about it and later remembered why it was needed and that it was a time when George had not yet ruined Carlo's name. Although George was a prince, he was also the son of a concubine, and in order to take the throne himself, he needed to destroy Carlo's reputation. And in the past, he had used a masking potion that she designed and prepared for this purpose. George, who looked like Carlo, seduced his cousin, the Duchess, and then also the nuns in the monastery, and generally introduced a dirty game. Carlo's position was dire after that. George's plan worked, and angry nobles and priests refused to accept Carlo as crown prince. Now the heroine understood that it was a very insidious and dirty act. He lightly put his arms around her shoulders and spoke to her. She didn't want to feel his touch and pushed him away, which he was a little surprised by, then decided that she was just jealous of him because he was talking to others. After these words, she became even more angry and wanted to kill him. However, she quickly realized that there were no weapons, especially since George was a paladin. Paladins and saints were those who were blessed by the Pope at birth. They use a white aura, which was also called the power of the gods, and can heal themselves, so they are not easy to kill. They are admired by everyone. And she was despised, just because she used magic, and if anyone found out that she wanted to kill George, she would be killed immediately. Rita was upset, but had no other choice. She had to put up with it, at least for now. The boy smiled and remarked that she was a lady, and wouldn't even allow herself to be kissed, unlike Sabrina. He began to complain and press on pity that although he is better than Carlo, he has no chance, because Carlo is the son of the Empress, and he is a concubine, and that he needs to change something. He hated this fact, and Rita knew it. He said he only trusted her. Her family was also of royal blood, so he meant nothing to her. She did not pretend that anything had happened, deciding to herself that she would make George pay for everything. He noted that today she was more indifferent than usual and inquired about the reason. Rita was a little nervous, but tried to behave as usual. She could not pretend to be. She folded her hands into fists and smiled, answering what he must have thought. He replied that he thought she was mad at him, but he asked if she was not jealous. She pretended to smile and said that she believed his words that he had only her. Rita realized that she needed to be a little surprised, and the boy was looking at her thoughtfully. He wondered if she knew about his relationship with Sabrina. She answered negatively and tried to change the subject of the conversation, asking how he was doing with Count Cardinale. George replied that he had learned that she was to be married to the Prince of Catan and had come for her. Someday she would be glad to hear such words from him. And now she wanted to get out of here as soon as possible and put her thoughts in order. He patted the surprised girl on the head, but he replied that although the Count was rude to her, he was not a bad man. And he said this, knowing her history and that the Count had beaten and abused her. Then he began to lie that if Rita marries Joseph, she will help him a lot, and she will not need to be with Joseph for a long time, because he will make her empress, the one that will make her the most refined woman. Rita knew him too well, and he always used sweet words, trying to seduce her who was not accepted by society. But she already knew all this, so she did not plan to act on it, but she had her own plan. She agreed for her own benefit. The boy was surprised that she agreed so easily. She then turned on her game and said that she would wait for George to come pick her up and take her to his palace. George beamed and thanked her happily, and she tried to get away, noticing that he must have a lot to do. He kissed her hands and with his last words told her that he would stop by before she left and left. The girl wiped her hands and called Rona. The maid quickly entered the room. The heroine asked to bring aromatic oils, prepare a bath, and bring a disinfectant solution from the laboratory. Rona nodded and wondered if that was all. She replied that she did, and thought in her mind that she wanted to disinfect everything that George touched. She was a girl who could see the real one. Rita did not understand what these words meant. The girl thought that it could be about the eyes described in alchemical legends, but she quickly dismissed this idea and decided that she needed to rest and think about her next plans, since now she understands the situation and the time in which she returned at least a little better. Rita promised herself that this time she would save everyone. As the maids prepared for the heroine's wedding and discussed why she so suddenly agreed to it, even though she said she would never marry Prince Katana, the head maid made the others go back to their work. Rita packed all her things in her room. She was a little tired and knew she might not be in a hurry to get married, but she wanted to get out of here before George decided to come back. A maid came to her and inquired about the dress. The girl thought about this. She ordered a dress from a famous designer, Madame Este, who sewed outfits for the imperial family. The girl spent half of her budget in Katana on the previous dress. Although she did not want to marry Joseph the previous time, she wanted to have a wedding as luxurious as possible. This time, Rita asked to order it from an unknown boutique and make it more modest. Rona was surprised and tried to convince Rita that she needed a luxurious dress for the wedding, but the heroine didn't care. She didn't want to invite anyone. She wanted to have a quiet wedding and calmly prepare for her revenge. Catan was not fertile and did not have a large population. Rita loved it and decided that she did not want to invite many guests. But she told Ronnie that she is not the kind of person who wants a lavish wedding. In general, the whole marriage was to create pressure on Carlo. Clergymen and aristocrats insisted on him. Her father himself would not want to spend much time on this wedding. Rona turned to Rita. She said that the heroine would be the wife of His Highness and should not always obey him. Rita was frightened and asked if Rona was all right and if something had happened. She asked if it was because of her father. Her father, Roscoe Cardinale, was a terrible man who forced girls. Rona was worried and said no. Although Roscoe was the heroine's father, she hated him with all her heart. Therefore, Rita offered the girl to go with her to Catan. The girl was surprised and asked if it was possible, because she was not even a personal maid of the heroine. The heroine smiled reassuringly and replied that she could become one right now. Then a sad Sabrina broke in. Both girls looked at the maid who had just entered, but in a panic, she asked if Rita wanted to leave her here. The heroine looked at her tall, a little disappointed that the girl was eavesdropping. Sabrina began to ask if something was wrong or something happened. Rita knew that the girl understood what fate awaited her if she stayed. She fell to her knees and started apologizing for what happened to George and that it wasn't her fault, and it was all his. She said that he bailed her out, and she couldn't do anything. Rita knew that even though the boy was a terrible person, he would not marry someone who refused him. Rita was silent, and Sabrina got up from the floor. But she whispered in her ear that she would tell everyone that the heroine had an illegitimate child. The Count was a clergyman, and so that there would be no scandal, he raised Rita as his daughter. Sabrina always threatened her with this. The heroine exhaled heavily once it really worked, and she was afraid. Sabrina gritted her teeth and didn't understand why the heroine wasn't scared. After that, she suddenly hugged Rita and began to ask her to take her, and that she would never look at George again. The heroine once thought that the boy was coming to see her, but now she realized that maybe he was coming to Catan for Sabrina, so she decided that in order to destroy the boy's plan, she must be taken as well. The girl immediately shone, but Rita gave one condition, so that she would not reach out to her. Catan was also called Land Forsaken by God. Joseph was a good ruler and did everything to improve life in the city. Rita noticed that it was cool even in the middle of summer, and they were heading to the castle in Catana. The heroine considered Catan much better than Cardinale. It was a good city, they differed in many ways. An abandoned prince, and in such a place, she did not know who could have known that he would become an archduke. The carriage shook violently. Rita did not know what had happened, but Rona answered that there was a monster outside. The two maids panicked, but the heroine was quite calm, and they asked her what to do because they did not know if the knights had ever killed monsters. The girl confidently said that everything will be fine. Elsewhere, she would have worried, but now they were in Catana and she knew Joseph would be there in time to help. There were two types of swordsmen in the Empire who fought monsters: paladins who used holy and light auras and demon hunters who used dark auras. Joseph, who was now to be her husband, was a demon hunter and possessed a dark aura. The girls began to panic and say that the hunters have come and that they bring death, but Rita was calm. The Knights of Catan came to their aid. In the capital, Joseph selected the best knights and hunters and brought them to guard Catan, which was considered an abandoned land. In the future, the city prospered. It was great for 7 years, but it was not bad now. After George ascended the throne, many people would move here. This time, she decided that she would use her powers, not hide them, in order to protect Catan. Rona looked out the window. But as it turned out, the knights of the city had already defeated all the monsters. Rona was delighted. It was the first time she had seen these knights. She did not see them because they were usually in the north. One of the girls saw the Archduke through the window. Rita was surprised to see him with the knights. She did not remember Joseph coming in person before. Rona lit up like a sun and took Rita's hands. She was glad that Joseph seemed like a good person. Rita smiled. She really thought he was a good person. He was a forgotten prince, the owner of an abandoned gray castle. He is the king of the desert north, the one who could never smile warmly. And also her husband. I asked her why they never talked about him in social circles. Rona fixed the heroine's hair, and she asked if Rona knew about the past crown prince. The answer was yes. In the past, he had died of a disease that caused his skin to rot. He was believed to be cursed. The girl confirmed that it was about him. She told a story about which few people know. Joseph was actually from the royal family of Las Vecchia, and they wanted to hide the fact that he was born as a demon hunter, so they sent him to the cold north, to the dark, cold part of the north, which was filled with monsters and most likely expected his quick death. No one thought that Catan would prosper, and Rita was proud of him. When Joseph became an adult, he began to avoid places where there were many people and felt like a prisoner in the imperial castle. The only ones who knew that he was the older brother of the current crown prince were the imperial family and the temple. Despite his beauty and achievements, there were no marriage proposals. Most likely, his eternally cold expression and demon hunter moniker played a role. But she knew that he was not idle, for he had done everything in his power to save her, a wife who was generally only lip service. The carriage door opened and the girl looked around. Joseph was outside the door looking at her. Rita noticed that he looked much younger than the last time she saw him. Last time she got married when she was 20 and he was 24. Rita introduced herself and bowed slightly, and he replied that this was not their first meeting. The girl got a little nervous and began to think about where they could see each other and whether it could be at her debut. She nodded. It wasn't that important. There could just be a lot of people in the castle. The guy remained silent and then introduced himself. And then he kissed her hand. But he said that they would meet in the castle. She continued to ride in the carriage, but she became hot. Rita was getting ready, and the butler asked if she really just wanted to rent the cathedral, since she and Joseph could afford more. Also, he noted that this is a deliberate marriage of the holy community and the imperial family, and it should be more global. She smiled as her father and George really did their best. In the past, Joseph got mad that they were getting married in a cathedral, even though he wasn't a member of the imperial family and thought Joseph was arrogant, and then got mad at Rita when he found out it was her idea. She didn't know if he was angry at all. Although Joseph did not like the attention, he agreed to use the cathedral as a wedding hall. But in the end, Joseph forced her to marry, and then argued for a luxurious wedding. At first, she thought it was simple jealousy, but looking at it now, it was his broken ego. Although George was a paladin, he never defeated Joseph. She told the butler, addressing him by name, that just a gray hall would be suitable for the wedding hall. And with a smile, she said that she already knows that Joseph is a wonderful person. He was surprised that she knew his name. Rita got nervous because she forgot that she was not who she was in the future. In the past, the girl saw Dante every day. He was a faithful butler of the duchy, so of course she knew his name and even the name of his youngest child. She got out by saying that she learned his name in advance because she will be the duchess here. The butler smiled and the topic ended, but the girl still felt uncomfortable that she was lying. Rona was preparing Rita and said that she wanted to offer a dress from Madame Esta first. But looking at the heroine now in a rather simple dress, she thought that the heroine had excellent taste. But the fact that the modest dress showed the lady's beauty even better, even the heroine was surprised, because it looked much better than she expected. Rona said that it was because the lady was already very beautiful and asked Sabrina's opinion. She reluctantly answered that this is why Rita is known in higher circles. Rona corrected Sabrina's expression. Rona wanted Sabrina to say that Rita wasn't just as beautiful as she was, and blindingly beautiful like a summer rose cardinale, and its beauty can drive you crazy. But she added that Rita is much more beautiful than Sabrina, and that Sabrina needs to be less self-confident. She quickly agreed and turned around, and Rona was satisfied. The heroine fell in love with Rona even more. A butler came for her and announced that he would take her to the festive hall. She walked and thought that this was her only and last chance, that she will no longer make previous mistakes and wrong choices. She approached Joseph. They stood next to each other and looked at each other. The girl was thinking about what a person who gets married loving another can think about. Love was in the past. On the winter day after Yvonne was born, she heard a confession she would never forget. The ceremony began, and the priest began to ask if Joseph was ready to love Rita forever. He agreed. Then they asked Rita if she would love him. She swore that she would. They unanimously vowed to be together for the rest of their lives. Although they won't be able to be together forever, she promised that she would definitely make him happy at least this time. Usually they kiss after that, but last time it was a kiss on the cheek. Suddenly Joseph spoke. But with a slight smile, he asked if he could kiss her and if she would mind. It was the second time she had gone around a large area today and was now taking a bath thinking about how to improve the situation. Through Joseph's leadership, Katana became viable, but it was still barren land. She wanted to use alchemy to purify the earth. She remembered Joseph, but she was confused about the kiss. She did not understand why he suddenly decided to kiss her. She was trying to think about him and continue with her alchemy when there was a knock on the bathroom. It was Rona, and she calmly walked in and apologized for bothering her. Rona was now calling her madam, which amused Rita a little, and the maid explained that Rita was now an archduchess, not just a lady. Rita calmed down. She returned and was once again the Archduchess of Catan, something she was used to in the past. Now she wanted to protect everything important to her. For this, she had to put the third Prince Carlo on the throne instead of George. Because if George takes the throne again, she will not save Yvonne. Although alchemy turned back time, it is not known whether the prophecy of Lawrence's oracle changed, which George was talking about telling Rita that Yvonne would become a demi-queen. She wrote down her ideas in a notebook, remembering her daughter. The girl was worried about whether they would be together again and whether they would be able to see each other again. The woman perfectly remembered her child's birthday when Joseph came to her. But then she spent the whole night with him. It was the day of the creation of Laurentia. There was an annual festival during which the moon was at its brightest, and on that day George won the battle for the throne, and Saint Evelyn officially became empress. Rita did not know if everything would work out for her, but she hoped for the best, and that if they were destined to meet, they would see each other. She couldn't let Yvonne die and leave her again. Because of this, the heroine came up with a plan according to which, on the day of the holiday, she should save the third prince, who suddenly died before that. The girl was sure that it happened because of George. To save the prince, the second part of the plan was put into action, namely to increase the power of Catan. She was hindered by the Holy Order, which included all the highest people of the empire. They all had common interests and were related, for example, not distant relatives. Her father was also in the order, and the order chose George as the next emperor, she thought. The only territory that could help Carlo was Catan. But the situation in Katana was not the best. It was located in the north. There were many monsters in its territory, and the weather was difficult to endure. Rita had an idea that consisted of changing the land or planting something that could grow in such conditions. The third part of the plan was for the girl herself to develop her abilities so that she could be independent. And if it works, then she will be able to see her relatives again, whom she loves very much, and she would finally see Yvonne. Rita felt guilty because she didn't know how to be a mother then, but this time she promised herself that she would protect her daughter no matter what. Her mother wanted to see her grow up. The girl was writing it all down on paper, thinking about what she needed to do and how, but suddenly she was approached from behind. Rita looked around, thinking that Rona had come to her. She was very surprised to see that George came to her and asked why she was writing so late. He asked that, and she was still in shock. A little nervous, Rita asked why he came to her bedroom. The man sat down at the table and answered that she was now his wife and had not yet had time to get used to the new place. He began to say that he wanted something. The heroine blushed, remembering that this was their first night as newlyweds. But she did not let him finish, saying that if he wanted to do it, he should wait. And he finally agreed on what he wanted, namely that if she needed anything, she could turn to him. There was an awkward silence as she realized he hadn't said what she thought and was now angry with herself for not listening. And he asked what she meant. Rita was red and hid her face after asking if he wanted to know what she needed. The guy answered affirmatively and noticed that she was a girl who was worried about spending the night with him. About herself, the woman thought that she should talk less. The boy bowed his head slightly, and she was surprised that he looked very innocent. She thought that even the nickname First Imperial Sword didn't really suit him. Joseph spoke up and told her that he wouldn't force her into a relationship she didn't want. She smiled and replied that she knew that and that he was a good person. Rita wondered if he hated her as much as she hated him, but he never showed it and was always polite to her. The guy noticed that she didn't know him yet, at which she smiled and thought that she was good at reading people. He did not agree, and the girl was a little sad but remained silent. Changing the subject, she became more serious and asked if he wanted to know what she wanted from him. He agreed and asked her to tell him what she wanted him to do. The girl wanted to say something but fell silent, thinking. Rita didn't know if she could ask him for anything, since she owed him so much, but she didn't know how to thank him. A little flustered, she finally spoke, saying that she didn't need anything, but if he was here, they could talk. The woman wanted to talk to him about what they would do in the future as a couple, and handed him the papers. The man took them and began to read them. It was a contract. The woman said that they should be more careful with each other. Their marriage was just an agreement, not an act of love. Her father took him as a son-in-law only to put pressure on Carlo. Also, their marriage was used to get more information about the cardinals and the Order of Saints. And Carlo lost in this fight. Because of Joseph. Because he did not follow others, but if he was to create a deal, then with the right people. The guy was silent, and she was a little nervous and thought that maybe he didn't like some points. He repeated one of the points about not interfering in each other's lives. But he asked Rita what personal life means here. She answered that if he has another woman, she will not be jealous, and he should not be jealous of her. She smiled a little sadly and added that she is simply called a woman. She knew that unlike her former love for George, Joseph could find someone to love and she would support him because she wanted to see him happy. He asked if she is so serious about them that she divides the responsibilities of each of them. The woman said yes, and since they were married unwillingly, she would do her duty to help improve Catan and that her alchemy could help and improve the land. He became upset, and she asked what was with his expression. The girl asked if he thought she was talking nonsense and asked him to finish reading and ask if there were any questions. Joseph noticed that the contract sounded like a business plan, to which she replied that Catan simply had a lot of potential for development. But there are many opportunities for him. The girl really did not want to offend him. Taking his hand, she continued that she knew that he did not trust her yet and that he did not want to marry her. She will not ask to trust her country and land. Joseph frowned, and the girl asked not to suspect her just because she was a cardinal. He replied that he understood everything, and Rita's words lit up. Getting up from the table, she thanked him and said that it was already late, and he asked if that meant she wanted to rest. She wondered if he was tired, but she was told that he was not, and that he would read everything, and the girl could go rest. The man left, and the woman was surprised that he left the room so quickly. She looked around and saw a summer rose on the table. It was a rare flower that appeared only on cool days. The heroine took it with a smile and thought that perhaps Joseph had brought it from the garden. The butler was surprised that Joseph had returned so quickly. The boy ignored the question and just walked away and fell on the bed. Joseph covered himself with a blanket, and the butler realized that there was no intimacy, and the other guy asked if Rita kicked him out. The two men started arguing, and Joseph told them both to leave him alone. Both quickly left the room, one on his feet and the other carried. The guy remembered the girl, thinking that she didn't remember him either. He lay there and thought about himself and the whole situation. They appealed to the emperor and said that he should punish the crown prince and send to the war to the Western nations, and that they will be able to suppress the boy's aura if he will serve. The two boys knelt down on one knee, and the emperor was asked if he could allow the boy with the black aura to be left, although the holy aura was passed down in the imperial family. The man asked how a boy could become a demon hunter if even the empress was a saint. He was told that this was a stupid question, but they said that the empress behaved inappropriately. Suddenly, someone suggested that Carlo also undergo purification. Joseph was frightened and knew that his brother was too small. Carlo was shaking all over. The elder knew that his brother would not survive on the battlefield. Joseph suddenly spoke and told them not to insult their mother's honor and that he was the emperor's legitimate child. He lied that he was blinded by fame and sold his soul to the devil. Afterwards, they left the hall in silence. One of the saints was surprised and asked if it was true. She informed the emperor that such a sin cannot be washed away by fighting, and he asked what to do with the boy then. The answer was his expulsion. The emperor sighed and agreed and said he would send him to the battlefield to cleanse the sin. The two men talked about Joseph and how he was still fighting while so many others had fled, as well as the gossip about selling the prince's soul. Joseph did not die during all the battles. He was feared, despised, and insulted, although he was just minding his own business. Everyone hoped that Joseph would be killed on the battlefield, but he survived, and people began to fear. The emperor, hearing that the prince was still alive, decided to take a chance, since monsters had started in the southwest, and decided to send Joseph there. It meant almost the same thing as sending him to his death. He thought that the emperor would forgive him if he served. At this time, the boy sat on the lawn and smiled. For himself, he decided that he would rather die for the sake of all, while he was thinking that a hand reached out to him, and he was addressed. The girl asked with a smile why he was sitting here and whether he was lost. The boy was surprised that she touched him. He took his hand from her and said that he wanted to die. She was surprised and questioned. The girl began to ask a lot of questions, asked to play, which was refused because he said that the demon hunter could not play. She did not know who he was. The boy did not understand why she was with him and did not run away, because she should have felt his dark aura. Joseph told her that he was a dangerous man and reached for the roses. Taking one of them in his hands, she immediately faded and he showed it to her. She thought and then smiled, poking at the rose, and said that it was interesting, but why can't he play with it? He began to explain that he had a spoiled aura. The girl did not understand and still wanted to play. The boy once again showed the rose and asked if she was not afraid. He did this to her by making the flower wither. She took out the bottle and replied that it was nothing out of the ordinary, as she could do the same thing with a few drops of poison. After dripping the poison, the rose also withered, and the girl smiled, asking if not everyone could do that. Joseph asked if she was an alchemist and told her not to flaunt it. He explained that in this empire, such abilities could be hated. Rita smiled and answered that then she hated people who said that and bit the rose, and then said that she didn't care what they said about her and that she wanted to leave this empire. She frowned and told him not to die today, and he decided he could play with her because she looked lonely. But he recognized himself in her. Days, weeks, 15 days in total passed, and he abandoned his plans to die. Returning to the present, Rita was sitting at the table and asked the butler why the earth that was brought was brown. They answered, "That such land is the most in Katana." The guy asked what was wrong, and the woman began to explain. In Katana, there was supposed to be gray earth, which is considered cursed, and its structure is easily destroyed, so there was little land to plant compared to the territory. She said the same thing to the boy, to which he replied disinterestedly that there was some southern land. The guy's name was Manuel, and he didn't love her in his past life, but he didn't show it as openly as he does now. She got up, deciding that she would do everything herself, and said that the boy could go. He frowned and stood still. The girl asked if he wanted to say something. Manuel asked why she needed the land, to which she replied as an ingredient for alchemy. This was to develop Catan and improve its fertility. He said that Sabrina was right and that dealing with the earth was hard even to the point of being cursed. And now he was sure that Rita wanted to destroy agriculture and warned that Joseph knew everything and that she should not interfere with alchemy. The girl was shocked that she left Sabrina alone, and now she is walking around and spreading false rumors. The girl thought Sabrina always lived comfortably and even made friends with her father and never understood her place. Rita was sure that if her maid had not been George's mistress, she would have been her father's. And although in society she is considered the only daughter of the Count, but in fact in the mansion she was just his illegitimate child. But now she was an archduchess, which meant she had a much higher status than before. The girl arrived in fields where the soil was definitely gray. Sabrina was dressed a lot, as Rita told her to dig here, and the girl was very surprised by this. She began to beg to dig Rona because her clothes were going to be destroyed, and George bought them for her and started telling her that he would soon take her to the palace. After the wedding, she did not even try to hide her affair with George. The maid was confused and said that she could prove, and she had letters from him. She acted as if she was above Rita in status and thought that she had already won George's heart. The heroine approached Sabrina and landed, saying that the boy is not even an emperor yet. But the fact that even if she is the mistress of the second prince, now she is just his servant. The girl was surprised by such words. She warned that if she had to repeat it again, Sabrina would walk back. She wanted to show her who was really higher. The sun was already setting, and no matter where they went, there was not fertile land everywhere. The heroine sighed heavily. Rona asked if Rita still wanted to look around. The girl said no, and they would go back as soon as Sabrina returned. And just then she screamed and started running to the other two girls. She was very scared and asked for help and directions. As it turned out, there was a monster there. He looked like a wolf and started running at them. Sabrina hid behind Rita. The wind rose and she covered her face with her hands. The heroine was calm and even had a slight smile. She was sure that the Knights of Catan would come now. The girl ordered the other girls to run away, but she stayed there. When she turned around, she saw a crying Rona, and the other had already run away. She was not surprised by this. A monster was approaching her. She was already standing in a magic circle, although she did not expect to meet a monster, but she was ready, all the more wolf-like, and when they were already preparing to go back. The monster was roughly grabbed by the skin, but they threw it into flight so that it flew past Rita. The girl herself did not even have time to understand what was happening and cursed. She looked around a little nervously. But she already guessed who could throw the monster away with one hand, so of course it was Joseph. He looked at her and asked if she was all right. Rita blushed a little and replied that everything was fine and she was not hurt. One of the knights started talking about Sabrina and that she ran away, and the other replied that Rita told them to run, and they agreed that the girl was a good person who cared about her maids, and one of the men carried Sabrina over his shoulder back to everyone. Rita thought that most likely the girl fainted when she saw the Guardians of the Earth. The boys were still surprised by what the heroine did. According to rumors, she was a completely different person, but she looked charming. Many people will now understand that she is not a bad person. The girl laughed a little, and this was noticed by Joseph, who was still standing next to her. He reached out and took the twig from Rita, but said he was worried because it was getting dark and asked what she was doing in the fields. The girl thought that maybe he himself came because of this, and said that she wanted to take some soil samples to study them. Manuel shouted that she wanted to curse the earth. Joseph looked around a bit. He gave the boy a critical look and told him to watch what he said and what he accused her of. The butler was a little nervous, but said that the prince did not believe him for nothing. The girl pulled his sleeve. The man looked at her. Then she looked into his eyes and told that she was not a witch. Therefore, she could not cast a curse. She really wanted him to believe her. The man took her hand and replied that he had never thought of her as a witch. Later, he let her go, but asked her to tell what the land was for when they returned to the castle. He ordered his men to deal with the monster, as the girl immediately remembered him. She panicked a bit and started asking what they wanted to do with the monster and that they wouldn't kill it. He asked why it couldn't be killed. Rita exhaled and said that the monster was female and also pregnant. There are monsters that could be tamed using holy beasts. The only way to tame a wild and aggressive monster was to do it from their childhood, when they were not yet exposed to magic. Saint Evelyn, who was the wife of George, used this method to tame the Black Dragon of Geneva. She wondered if she could tame the dragon, the king of monsters. Then he could help protect Catan. She couldn't pass up such a chance. However, she did not have the same holy power as Evelyn, so the girl wanted to practice on the wolf-like monster. The mother already had little strength, but Rita could save her child. The problem was that this method of taming was invented much later. The heroine had a dilemma as to whether she could somehow say or explain it, but Joseph said that everything was fine and she could not explain. The woman was surprised and asked whether everything would really be okay and she could do it. He smiled and promised that he would not kill her mother. The girl was surprised that he agreed so easily. She thanked him, and the boy went on to say that they couldn't just leave the monster on the road and they had to figure something out. Rita smiled and told him not to worry, and she knows. What shall I do? The woman used alchemy and told the others that they would need to find an empty cave for the monsters. In the meantime, she will take her to the forest. Rita sat and practiced alchemy in the library in the castle. The woman was able to make the soil more moist, and now planting plants should become easier. They knocked on the library and asked if they could come in. She answered in the affirmative, looking at the door. Joseph entered, who was told that she was looking for him. Rita replied that she wanted to show him something. Passing to the girl, he noticed that the library had become his wife's laboratory. The woman showed him a flask of red soil and asked if he knew where it was from. He looked and said that it is red, which means it is red soil. Rita smiled and replied negatively, saying that it was the same land from the Catan Plains. She was very happy that it turned out that her alchemical experiment was successful. The girl told her idea to change the composition of the gray soil to red and asked him to look at the results of other studies. There were no alchemists in Catan, but there were many scientists who were knowledgeable in various fields, and because it was only in the north. In the future, a magic tower will be built there and she will be able to use their power. She also added that she was sure that the land was suitable for planting, although she could not prove it, and that the girl would use her own funds, not Catan's budget. In response, the man asked why she was doing all this at all. The answer was that she promised to do everything in her power to improve Catan while she was Archduchess. Joseph asked what she meant while she was Archduchess. She thought she had written about it in the contract, but from the looks of it, he really didn't understand. Although she needed the contract, he might not be interested. She wanted to put Carlo on the throne, increase Catan's budget. This should interest him in the contract. She said that she wants to deal with construction in the Katana area as well. He took out the contract and asked if what she wanted was only one clause, namely that they would divorce when the time came. The girl confirmed that she was, and that he would not look for her if she ever left the empire. If everything went well, she would like to go with Yvonne and raise her into a happy person, without extra people. Joseph got a little angry and asked if she was really asking him not to look for his wife, who would just disappear at some point. The girl did not understand why he was angry. They both stood, and the woman got nervous and said that she did not think that this could be a minus in the contract. Rita thought that when she left, he could be with the woman he loved and be happy without her. The man fell silent and looked sad, and she turned to him with a question. Joseph remained silent a little longer and answered that everything is fine and clenched his hands into fists. The girl did not understand what was wrong with him. Dvoretsky stood behind Rita and informed her that the farmers she wanted to see had arrived. Only 3 farmers from all of Catan who had borrowed land from the prince came, 2 men and a woman. She understood that many simply decided not to come, but she was surprised because she, the Archduchess, called them. Dvoretsky noticed Rita's look. He bent down and explained to the girl that many people in Katana do not trust the nobles, so they do not listen to orders, and she did not choose not to appear, despite her status. Rita understood that this was not the main reason for their absence. She thought it was because she was a former cardinal, and the people from the north didn't like the family because of the long war between the south and the north that had long roots. The genus Cardinale was known as the Rose of the South and had a terrible reputation in northern areas, because they captured the only arable plain in Catan by showing false documents that the people of Catan had once stolen it. People from Catan were also hired to work in dangerous and distant places for meager wages. Afterwards, the girls smiled and thanked those who came. The woman replied that it was not a problem. Rita began to question if they had checked the land she had given them, and began to explain that she had done so through the aid of alchemy, when the man interrupted her and asked if she believed the red soil was the land of Catan. The girl looked at him. It was Mr. Umberto. The other girl was a little afraid of him. Rita knew a lot about this man. Before returning to the future, there was an incident where he called her a witch and told her to bring back his son while he was being held by the knights. Umberto's son died through the Cardinale family. This man was often used in the terrible deals of the Cardinale family. But in the past, she replied that if he wants his son back, he must return the money he received from her father. Then she said it very coldly. Now she felt guilty for her action, although his son was still alive. The man got up from the table and said that he would not forgive her. The second guy agreed. Both of them left the room and said that they should never be called here again. Only Rita and the girl remained. The heroine knew that many people hated her because of her father. She was used to it. The farmer was upset that even the youngest had left, but the Archduchess still had hope. The woman said that there should be a small piece of soil. The girl looked back at her, but asked if she wanted to try it. The girl thought about it. She apologized a little awkwardly for her father. Rita asked if this girl was Umberto's daughter, to which she confirmed and was surprised that she knew him. The heroine went off topic and answered that a little, but the girl asked if Rita knew where the children hired by the Count were sent, because her brother had not been heard from for a long time. She thought that it must be the guy in the mine in Sirte, because there was going to be an accident at that time as well. The woman wanted to go there anyway, because the dragon's egg was supposed to be hidden there. She said everything is coming together, that she will find out where the girl's brother works. Arriving at the prince, she told him that she wanted to go to the mine. He asked if she knew that monsters often appear there. She calmly answered that yes, and continued to drink her tea. Joseph didn't think it was a good place for her to go and didn't support her very much. Rita replied that there was no need to worry about her, and that her actions would not reflect badly on him or his reputation. The man frowned and said that he was not worried about himself, but about her. The woman did not understand what he was worried about then and why, so she looked at him questioningly, but he remained silent. She noticed that she didn't understand him much lately. Recently, Sabrina asked to be a maid for Joseph and tried to seduce him by wearing underwear while cleaning. But they say that she was immediately expelled and fired. At first, Rita thought that the problem was with the girl, and this surprised her. He was very polite, but somehow he broke into her room. Joseph looked flustered and apologized for barging in, and lest she think too much, she was surprised by his actions. The boy was rarely like that, and she didn't know what that could mean. Although the heroine herself did not often show emotions, she was not easily read. But she didn't understand what was happening from the beginning when she went back in time. As it turned out, Joseph decided that he would go with her. Rita did not understand why and asked him about the reason, to which he replied that he was told that a monster had appeared there. Yes, since they have to go to one place, it will be easier to go together, and apologized for the possible inconveniences associated with this. The girl noticed that even with such a reason, it is not necessary for him to go personally, but it can be left to other knights. He looked away and said that the report said that new types of monsters had appeared there and that he should personally check it out. Rita wondered if the accident had something to do with monsters. Later, she exhaled, nodded, and agreed with him. They were traveling in a carriage, and she hoped that all problems would be resolved. When they arrived, they were met by the man, Milan, who was Cardinale's personal and managed this mine, and said that he did not know about their arrival, so he could not prepare anything for them. The girl replied that there was no need to cook anything, while Joseph looked around. After that, the man asked why they had come, to which the prince replied that he had heard that monsters had appeared in the neighborhood and had come to solve this problem. After seeing how much damage the monsters had caused, he said that they needed to fix this problem before it was too late. Mylan nodded and asked the other boy to lead them both into the mine. The boy was still small and a little nervous, but quickly agreed. Joseph once again tried to convince Rita not to go there because it could be dangerous. She ignored his remarks and replied that they should go there soon. The man did not have time to say a word, as the woman had already left, and the little boy asked where they should be taken. He was told that it was to the place where he saw the first monster. All three went into the dark mine, and the young man gave them all lamps. The Archduke carefully looked around for any danger, but his eyes were shining. The boy was surprised to see Joseph alive and asked Rita if she could see the prince in the dark. He was interested because before that he had only heard it from hearsay. The girl understood why the young man admired this. She herself saw for the first time how Joseph's eyes lit up. In the Paladin Empire, hunters looked down on their strength, but she didn't like such division and clenched her hands into fists. The man saw this and came up to ask if everything was okay with her. The heroine smiled and shone the lamp, saying that he has beautiful eyes, he is a little squinted. Their moment was interrupted and they heard a scream. The girl looked around, wondering what had happened. Everything started shaking and falling. She panicked a little. Let's go back. A few days before they went to the mine. Rona went somewhere thinking that Rita has been working a lot lately. The little monster that was saved then was named Bibi. The heroine restrained him with the help of alchemy and tried to tame him, for example, to sit on the team. She independently worked with him and calmed him down. People were surprised that a monster was brought there, and if so, that it was being trained. It would be total chaos, Rona said. And she also added that she brought everything that Rita asked for, and looking at the heroine with the monster, she was surprised that he was sleeping so peacefully. Rona came closer to look, and the Archduchess said that she was playing with him, and when she left, he fell asleep. Another girl noticed that he looked like a human child. The heroine agreed, saying that when he sleeps, he has an angelic face. Rona noticed that the girl remembered someone while looking at Bibi. She looked lonely. Rita touched Bibi a little and said that he would take care of her in the future. Her maid was glad that the woman looked happier now anyway. Back in the present, the girl almost fell, but Joseph caught her in time and wrapped his arms around her waist. He anxiously asked if she was all right. She replied that she was fine because she managed to get away, but it was not clear why the mine had collapsed. But the boy said that it looked more like a trap. She thought about it but did not know who could do such a thing, and asked if everything was okay with the little boy. Joseph said that he heard breathing behind the wall, so that the girl would not be too worried. The woman exhaled. She was glad that the young man was still alive. The man noticed that she is, as always, soft-hearted and deeply concerned about others. She thought of others, and Joseph thought that nothing had changed since they were children, and she helped him without even knowing who he was. Flashing back to when they were children, little Rita talks about the banished Prince Angelus, who was also a demon hunter. And then she continued that most likely he was kicked out because of that, and that he went south, but she did not see him. Joseph asked if she was afraid of that prince because they were talking that he is a demon. In response, she got a little angry and asked if he really believed stupid rumors so easily, and the fact that the prince did not die on the battlefield simply means that he is strong and there is nothing wrong with that. The girl said that she does not believe people who speak badly of others and that Joseph himself is not a demon, as they say about him. He looked at her a little surprised, and Rita with a serious expression told him not to die. She handed him something and told the surprised boy to go to Odabel because demon hunters can live there in peace. It was a ticket. He glanced at it. And then at the girl, on whose hand there was a bruise from the beatings, who said that she needed the ticket more. Rita replied that she could not go yet because her father would not let her go, but one day she would definitely leave the Empire. The one who will leave when she is ready to become free, and asked him for help in the future. Then he couldn't go and couldn't help her. Now he also couldn't fully fulfill the promise, but he tried to make things better. The girl screamed a little, which brought him back to the present. Joseph asked if she hurt her leg, and the girl began to deny it and said that everything was normal. Rita understood that she must have sprained her leg and was not happy about it. The man took off his shirt even though it was already dark. The girl was surprised by this. Joseph carefully took her leg and tied his shirt on it. The woman thought that the boy was an emotional person. He finished tying the bandage and she thanked him. Rita did not want to leave Joseph and asked if he had not heard anything and if everything was fine with him. He listened to her, and she spoke that they had an arranged marriage, and if he fell in love with another woman, so she wants to stay friends with him and live peacefully. She finished with a slight smile. The man squeezed the ground. She thought he was surprised that she knew about his secret lover. But she quickly decided to change the subject and asked how they would get out, since the sword could not be used because everything would collapse. Then the girl remembered something and looked up, and the man asked what she had come up with. But she answered that this plan would not work for him, but it might work for her. There was a hole at the top through which the woman was able to get out, although it was difficult, but she did it and shook herself from the dust. Looking around, she saw Mylon with a dragon, although she expected something similar, but not like this. He asked whom she was waiting for. Her hands were tied tightly. She understood that it was this man who destroyed the mine. Then the men demanded to destroy the ceiling of the mine while she sat tied up, unable to do anything. The heroine did not understand how they were able to tame and control the black dragon. It occurred to her that Malin might have been a tamer. Such people could control monsters with their own inner strength. As demon hunters and alchemists, they used dark aura. Such people were very rare to find, especially in an empire where holy power prevailed. But this option fell away. The girl saw the staff he was holding, and if the man was a tamer, then the dragon would not have suffered so much. Rita could not understand exactly what this man did, and especially how. He screamed about how much he owed and about control. The girl understood that he was talking about a layer of remote control, through which their power disappears. The dragon was caught using a similar method. The man was left without profit because the minerals ran out and Kimmer's experiment failed. The woman was surprised to hear about this experiment. He himself knew why the experiment failed, due to lack of money and transport, but Rita's father ignored all requests for more resources. It was an experiment about connecting monsters that shouldn't have been possible. She got up a little and asked how they wanted to finish it then. The man replied that they would use them as human material, and Rita fell into shock and fear. Mylon replied with a crazy smile that those children would be the material for the connection with the dragon. Rita angrily replied that people like them must die. The man told her not to say such a thing, because Chimera obeys him perfectly and wanted to show it to her. Demons started flying at her. She wanted to protect herself with alchemy, but they were approaching too fast. She was scared, but someone suddenly pushed her away to a safer side. It was Joseph who appeared out of nowhere and was able to protect her. Why the girl was very surprised, he replied that he heard a noise, so he decided to get out himself. He dug his own way out, and she was even more surprised by this. Then the guy got into a fighting stance and asked the girl to close her eyes. Rita could not believe that the head of the Order of Saints was such a rotten and terrible person. Another boy tried to ride the dragon but almost fell off it. She decided that this was her best chance to let everyone else know who the head of the Saints really was, so she needed to preserve all the evidence. Her father, the head of the Cardinale family, had many enemies over the years. He was the head of the Saints. He had power, so he used it to influence other aristocracy, and he even had connections with the Pope. He, of course, sponsored George's paladins. If people found out that he was conducting such experiments on living beings, his credibility and reputation would collapse. The man had fallen from the dragon and was covered in blood, which was bad for her plan. The heroine did not even know who could come up with such a thing. A man in black began to approach Rita and said that they had not seen each other for a long time. The girl looked at him in surprise and agreed with him. The boy suddenly grabbed her hand and kissed her without her permission, which she was not happy about. He said he missed her. As it turned out, it was the head of the Spin Assassin Guild named Oscar Spina. Rita took her hand from him, and he complained that she got married and didn't even call him, but said that she looked beautiful. He came even closer, but she stopped him, asking him not to come near her. Joseph noticed this, and in a moment was standing in front of the girl, protecting her from the boy who almost fell. He asked Oscar to leave, as Rita had asked before. The guy raised his hands up and complained that they hadn't even met, and he was already attacking. He said that he thought he was a bully, threatening those weaker than himself. The young man smiled and said that he may be a little rude, but he has a normal past, unlike the prince. But he repeated the rumor that Joseph was the abandoned crown prince who was supposed to be dead. The second one didn't answer that. Rita spoke now, telling Oscar not to use her father's sword to fight her husband. In the past, this boy was her father's hound dog, so surely nothing has changed now. He agreed and said that he would take them both to the Count, she thought while holding Joseph's hand. She was not happy that her father was here too. The prince was worried about the girl and asked if she wanted to talk and see the Count now. The woman did not understand why he had such an expression on his face and thought that from the outside it looked like she was her father's spoiled daughter. She was sad. She didn't want to talk to her father, but she couldn't show her hostility towards him either. He came to her alone. He was also angry and started shouting about what she was doing here and why she was meddling in their affairs. The girl understood that he had not changed, but she did not think that he was so often in such distant places. Her father, with a serious face, reminded her of their plan, which consisted of finding Carlo's weak spots, and asked if she really loved Joseph. She refused, saying that she still loves George and would not do such a thing. The girl smiled and pretended to support her father, and remembered that people like him are not so easy to kill. She thought about the most painful method to get rid of these people. The woman offered to sell this mine to Joseph, the man thought, straightening his mustache. But he asked if she really wanted to sell this useless mine to the Archduke of Catton. He didn't mind doing it, but he wasn't sure Joseph himself would agree. With a sly expression on her face, Rita asked him to force him to buy the mine, and then she would talk to him, so her dad could not worry. He smiled and replied that she still made some sense. The girl's face did not change, but she remembered his words about her futility in the past. How in his childhood he called her useless, a senseless parasite and a living worm. This is how he addressed her, beat her, and almost did not give her normal food. Therefore, since childhood, the girl wanted to become what he needed. Now she considered it a waste of time and a stupid thing to do, and her father had already left, leaving her behind. After some time, she finally found the black dragon, who was injured and covered in blood. Rita revealed that she had run away to protect her egg. The woman began to approach the dragonfly, realizing that she did not have much time left, but she was still worried about her egg, so she could not even sleep peacefully. When she approached, she asked if the dragon was worried, and she said that she would take care of her child. The girl made a promise to the dragon, but she began to die, closing her eyes and disintegrating. Rita just managed to catch the egg and took it in her hands. She looked at him and said that she would do everything in her power, for she had promised his mother. Then the girl was already sitting in the carriage and talking to Rona about the fact that there must be children in the barns, and they must be brought safely to her. In places where dragons died, a particularly pure stone appeared. These stones were very expensive and could greatly help Catan in increasing their capital. In the past, the child Geneva raised and trained St. Evelyn. Only then did everyone understand how important this mine was. Now she was sitting with Joseph in the carriage, but she didn't know if he would believe her, since it was just an old mine. But she couldn't let Cardinale get her, so she decided to tell her husband something. He asked if she was talking about that pile of stones. The girl was a little surprised by such a comparison, and then, nervously and coughing, she asked if Catan could buy this mine, and what it would cost, what could be done with it to make a lot of money. He asked if only she knew. The girl answered that while she knew about it from the secret organization of alchemists, she was coming up with reasons to sway him to her side. But she added that if he doesn't believe her, that's also normal and she won't bail. And everyone considers her a liar anyway. She was nervous. He said that he knew and agreed. The woman was very surprised by this. Rita seriously questioned whether he would really take her word for it and buy that pile of stones. Joseph said yes if the girl wanted it. Rita was worried and said that if someone would offer him a joint business or something similar, he should run away. At which the man noticed that he could not escape from the moving carriage. After his words, she added that it was about everyone except her, because she really does everything for Catan, so he can trust her. The man smiled and replied that he knew that too. They were driving, and she was thinking about the fact that no one would deceive him, and before she ran away, she would have to secure him. The heroine was outside and talking to a guy who was Umberto's son, whose name was Ollie. Rona stood supporting the boy and said that he was hiding in a safe place, so they could easily find him. He then guided them and said that he knew the mine well and wanted to tell about everything. But the road was blocked. The girl was a little surprised at how smart he was and said that the main thing was that he was safe and sound and that she would take him to his father. The boy was a little worried because he had not received his salary and that if he came back, he would be one more person to feed. Rita told him not to worry and that the family of the archdukes would pay him everything. What should? Ollie was very surprised and impressed by her actions. Rita asked Rona to take the boy to Dante to train as a civil servant and find a job that would suit other children based on their skills. The maid nodded and went to perform. The boy looked at her with rapt eyes as she pondered that she would have to raise the price of the stones if she was planning to hire children. Rita took the boy to his family, and he ran to his father and sister. The father hugged his son, and the boy began to cry. The heroine looked at them with a smile, remembering that she once looked at Yvonne with the same loving eyes. She was approached by a girl who thanked Rita while wiping her tears, and she asked her to help convince other farmers to use red soil. Serena replied that she had already used it herself, on her field, which was a little smaller. The woman was a little surprised and nervous. She was worried that something might go wrong. She nervously took her hand and asked if there was a result. The younger girl lit up and answered that it was wonderful soil and that everything grew in this land. Serena glowed with happiness because even the rice sprouted, and it was considered only for aristocrats. The heroine didn't even know how to feel. It was the first time she used alchemy for other people's happiness. The girl heard footsteps and the Archduke turned to her. He turned her and took her face with both hands and asked what was wrong with her. Rita did not understand what he was talking about. The man replied that her green eyes had turned red. The Archduchess replied that she was simply very happy because they said that her red soil works. The Archduke asked if it was true, and she answered in the affirmative. Ta continued that she wanted to divide this land among all the farmers of Katyn, and that if they showed the effectiveness of this land, then people would start using it. A family of farmers heard this, and the girl was enthusiastic about this idea. Joseph smiled and told Dante that the soil she created was working. Rita smiled brightly and thanked him. He froze at the beauty of the girl's appearance, and she looked at him questioningly, not knowing why he was looking at her like that. Dante and Joseph were in the library, and the first asked the man how many people they were taking to develop the girl's red soil. He was looking at one point flying in the clouds and thinking about her laugh and smile, and the butler turned to him once more. The boy remembered her laugh and look, wondering how she could laugh like that even though they had been married for 2 months. It was the first time he had seen her smile sincerely. He knocked on the table and thought that he was a bad man, while Dante calmly asked what the prince was thinking about. Joseph asked what month it was. It was the first day of August, but it was still cold outside, so he asked the butler to monitor the temperature in Rita's rooms. Dante was surprised at such a request and replied that it was quite warm there, but the man asked to make it as warm as it would be in summer. He said that it was fine, but he knew that the girl was hot anyway. The Archduke was worried that it was difficult for the girl to live in Katana. This area was very cold for a person who grew up in the south, and he even remembered that she did not like the cold when she was a child. As a girl, she did not like basements because of the memories and because it was cold there. He frowned and blamed himself for her shivering from the cold. The boy called the butler and asked that no one wants to see his benefactor tired. He replied that he probably did, and why would the Archduke ask him such a question at all? The boy rubbed his forehead, agreed, and thought. Rita was approached and told that people do not want to use the red soil. She folded her hands and was upset. Although Selena is already cultivating the land, Rika is against it because there are rumors that something is hidden in the land. Rita did not know about the rumors and was surprised, and then she was asked if it was true that she had bought an almost destroyed mine. The man believed and trusted her, but he had a question. The girl asked how he knew about the mine. Rita asked what the rumors were. The answer was that they said they spent a lot of money on that territory. He heard this from a young official who often visited the city, and he was close to Ricky. Then the woman thought she understood. That this is Manuel. The guy was Dante's nephew, but he lost his parents in childhood. They became close to each other. Joseph is also important to Manuel because he has taken care of him since he was a child. The prince loved him as a brother, perhaps because of the thoughts of that. How lonely Carlo is in the castle. After Dante, Manuel will manage the Archduke's mansion, but he was too arrogant and carefree in the past. The guy angrily walked around Joseph's office, saying that Rita was deceiving him and just using him, while the Archduke was just going about his business. But later he replied that even if it was so, he did not mind. The younger man was shocked to hear such a thing. The husband, not breaking away from his affairs, replied that if it would make his wife happy, then he would not mind. Then a voice was heard. Joseph looked up. Rita entered the room and asked what his words meant. He himself was a little scared. She repeated the question once more, looking serious. The girl came closer. The man asked again, not understanding what she was talking about. The woman touched his heart. He froze and froze. She went on to say that his heart was beating fast and was he afraid that she would lie to him. She looked upset and he said it wasn't like that. She didn't know if he just wanted to support her or if he really meant it. She was just looking for Manuel, and she heard that too. The woman turned to the younger man, who shuddered. He was nervous and pinched his pants, and the Archduchess explained to him that he had a reason for buying the mine, and asked him to wait until the merchants from the mine got the magic stones, and then he should believe her. The boy protested, saying that it was impossible and that only gold and other ores could be obtained from the mine, and not any magical stones. The girl turned away from him, saying that she didn't care if he believed her or not. She looked at Joseph and told him that his faith in her was very important to her, and asked that he said he would buy the mine to help her. But she added that he should save his help for later, because it could become his weakness. He reluctantly agreed to it. Rita knew that Joseph was such a man, and decided that she had to train Manuel to be with the Archduke for the future, so she turned to him. She said she wanted to talk to him and for him to go with her. He got nervous but obeyed. The girl rubbed her cane, thinking that it wouldn't hurt him because he was learning to be a knight, and the effect had to be tougher to be effective. She hit him, and he cried out and asked why she was hitting him, and that he was just worried about the Archduke. The girl explained that she didn't hit him because he was talking to him, and that she had heard that he had spread rumors that she had forced Joseph to buy the mine. He wondered what she knew and asked where. Rita cited one of the laws when becoming a family servant, namely that servants should not spread rumors about the family in which they work. And if he made a mistake, then he must receive a punishment, and that she hopes he knows this. She knew that she managed to scare the little one. Manuel began to shake and cry and admitted that he had specifically told him. The young man was surprised that she was so strong. She stopped hitting him, but said that she understood that he was worried about Joseph. He cried, and the girl continued that she knew they were like a family. And even when the Archduke said that it could harm her, the boy did not dare to tell others about the situation in the family. Rita asked if he knew why. He answered that no, it was hard to live in Katana, and there was little to grow. Many people believe in the Archduke and are confident in him and his reliability. That's why they started living here. The young man was silent. The woman asked the little one not to make them doubt and not to make them lose faith in Joseph. He nodded silently. The girl knew what he could talk about, such as the fact that she was a Cardinale witch who was using the good Archduke for her own gain and benefit. The people, of course, are worried about the prince, but in the long run these rumors will only make him worse. But Manuel could not understand this himself. In the past, she didn't think she would have to fight George, so she didn't notice it. The woman hated this prejudice based on statuses and families. She asked him if Sabrina had told him. He turned and confirmed. The young man thought about why she thought about this maid. Once he was cleaning and asked why Sabrina was not doing anything, and she, in turn, was sitting on the table and reading a letter. The girl smiled and explained that she was not here for work. Approaching the boy, she asked if he knew that the Archduke had bought the mine. He replied that he knew. The maid came up to him, making him blush, and said that the mine had belonged to Cardinale before, and that she seemed to be concerned that Joseph should not be deceived. He turned away and said that the last time she had talked about the land, everything had turned out to be wrong, and that the soil that Rita had come up with was incredible. The girl continued to talk to him about the fact that the mine is old, and the man bought it only through Rita, and the cardinals always do everything for their own benefit. She argued that it was you who had worked with the lady for a long time and knew her well, but you would not help anyone of your own free will. Sabrina had a sly smirk, and Manuel confirmed that he had heard similar words about Rita and the Cardinale family. She went on to say that the Archduchess was definitely up to something, and with the soil and the mine, something was definitely not right, and it was all very suspicious, and she could not be trusted. The guy decided that it sounded like the truth and believed this scary woman again. But he decided that it was necessary to talk to Ricky, because he has the most influence among people, and if he says this, then people will not blindly trust Rita. The maid beamed and said that it was a great idea and that he should do it. And she told me that she thought the guy was wonderful and incredible and smiled, and the guy was confused. He shuddered, and Rita asked again if it was her maid who made him believe that. The boy became visibly nervous and began to deny it, but the woman was already sure that it was definitely her. The heroine left that girl to know about George's plans, but did not think that she would start spreading such rumors. So the Archduchess decided that it was better to send her back to the Cardinale's house. The woman had been thinking since childhood. Sabrina looked down on her, as she was her father's favorite servant, and in this empire he had immense power and authority. She was beginning to understand what was happening around her, but she didn't know where to get the crown of the goddess. While she was sitting, the maid was already approaching her. If she knew where she was, she would no longer need to keep that maid by her side, and she would be served sweets. The crown of the goddess is a relic that transmits Laurencia's voice to people. Once it was in George's possession, and he interpreted the predictions as he wanted. And so he became the emperor. He called himself the chosen god in place of the emperor, and it was actually scary. The woman looked back at Rona and asked her to call Sabrina, and was a little surprised at the request. She replied that the girl had gone to meet George, who had just arrived at the Duke's mansion. Rita was surprised to hear about George and his arrival. The Archduchess did not understand why he had come so suddenly without even telling her about his arrival, but this was her chance. She entered the room, which was occupied only by a guy who was smoking, and spoke first, saying that he finally got to see her because he hadn't heard from her since she moved. He stood by the window and asked if she was all right. Rita had a serious expression on her face. If her plan worked, she would finally be able to get Sabrina out. George said that Joseph went out because he heard about a monster in the neighborhood, but it was not a problem for him because he did not come to him. The girl sat down on the couch and asked why he had come all the way to Catan. The man embraced her and said that the masking potion she had made for him had run out. Then he poked her on the cheek and asked how she was with Joseph. The girl pushed his hand away. She was disgusted by his touches and replied that everything was fine with her and he might not worry. He looked at her in surprise and asked if it was really so. Rita quickly changed the subject. She said that he has a medicine that she wanted to send him and asked if it has any side effects. He got a little scared and asked about the side effects and asked if he should be worried or pay more attention to something. The girl thought sadly and said that she could not say for sure. She added with a smile that he should be careful and not drink too much, but she herself knew that even the smallest dose had its side effects. She couldn't make a fake potion because it would be noticed, so she made one that after a long period of taking, the powers disappear.